Good morning, friends. It's time to Wake Up with Cheddar. Live from Lower Manhattan, I'm Baker Pachata.
Well, hey, Baker, good morning. I'm Chloe Aiello. I'm in for Shannon Lanier today. It's Tuesday, December 13th, and what a wonderful Tuesday it is.
Absolutely. My goodness, we have a lot to get to this morning. So come back to Wake Up with Cheddar with Chloe Aiello. I'm Baker Pachata, and just hours before the House Financial Services Committee is meeting to talk about Sam Bankman-Fried, news broke just a little bit ago that the FTX founder has been arrested in the Bahamas and charged with fraud. So here to break down everything we know in this developing story is the Defiant founder and author Camila Russo. Camila, thank you so very much for joining us this morning. So I do want to get to the developing stuff that happened just a little bit ago. Sam Bankman-Fried has now been charged with defrauding FTX investors by diverting funds to Alameda Research, calling it a years-long fraud. That's what prosecutors are saying here. So was this expected? It seems like this is developing and changing a lot by the hour.
Yeah, that's right. So Sam Bankman-Fried, the disgraced founder of FTX, was actually arrested yesterday in the Bahamas where he lives after prosecutors from the Southern District of New York filed criminal charges. But separately, the SEC had also been investigating him and actually disclosed their charges before the Southern District of New York is expected to unseal their charges this morning. And so what the SEC has charged him with is defrauding FTX's equity investors. So SBF has raised $1.8 billion from equity investors. And the SEC is saying Sam Bankman-Fried presented FTX as a reputable, safe exchange for cryptocurrencies, when in fact it was diverting customer funds to fund his hedge fund, Alameda Research. So this is obviously a huge breach of trust, and that's what the SEC is charging him for. We're still expecting to see what charges the Southern District of New York will bring, but the New York Times has already reported, citing people familiar with the matter, that those charges include wire fraud, conspiracy, securities fraud, and money laundering. So that's what we're expecting later today.
Now, Camila, I want to circle back to those charges in a minute, but of course, following his arrest, Bankman-Fried isn't expected to testify before the House any longer. So how will that limit the impact and scope of this hearing?
So he won't be testifying. He has just been charged, and it will. I mean, he was obviously the main event of the hearing. Lawmakers were expected to question him on all his dealings on FTX and Alameda Research, and that won't be happening anymore. So we'll have to wait and see how this legal case develops.
Now, let's talk about those charges again. As CEO, is Bankman-Fried ultimately responsible for all of this alleged fraud and, ultimately then restitution for investors too?
Of course. So SBF has gone on this media tour the past couple of weeks, trying to position himself as somebody who didn't really know what was going on in his own company. He was trying to chalk it all up to negligence rather than fraud. It looks like that was his legal strategy, but I think few people believe that can actually hold up in court. In the end, he was the founder, he was the owner, and the CEO of FTX and Alameda Research, and so he was ultimately responsible for what was happening in his companies. In the end, this was a $10 billion hole in FTX, in the exchange. That's the amount of money that was being funneled to Alameda Research. So I think most people will find it very hard to believe that the CEO had no idea that this was happening.
When you go through the charges from SEC Chair Gary Gensler, it's interesting because he says, we allege that Bankman-Fried built a house of cards on a foundation of deception while telling investors that it was one of the safest buildings in crypto. I mean, FTX was a major company. Do you think FTX is an extreme outlier, or could this suggest more legal consequences for the larger crypto industry here?
Well, I think both. I think he was an extreme outlier. I find it very hard to imagine others in crypto were dealing with this level of fraud. And what Gary Gensler is saying here is also at the same time, all other centralized crypto trading venues need to comply with existing securities laws. So even if Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX were outliers, that doesn't mean that there will be more regulatory scrutiny on the rest of crypto, as there should be. I think this has proven that centralized crypto exchanges need more transparency and need more accountability. As we cover daily on the Defiant, on the news company that I run, centralized crypto is in need of higher standards, really, that really reflect the transparency that this technology is supposed to bring. Crypto is supposed to be more open and more transparent, and the underlying blockchain actually is. But then, ironically, the exchanges where you trade crypto are these opaque venues. So I think this is what's coming up later for following this for the larger crypto industry.
Yeah, and it just seems like it's evolving and changing so much by the hour. Camila, such a pleasure to have you here. Camila Russo for breaking that down for us. And of course, Cheddar News will be continuing to cover this story as it develops. And coming up next,